What role did foreigners play in Nanking during Japanese control of the city? Part 2. John Magee, Wilhelmina Voltrin, also referred to as Minnie, and George A. Fitch also contributed to Nanking during Japanese control. Magee was an American missionary and had one of the most advanced cameras at that time and documented the genocide. Minnie was also an American missionary, and she protected many Chinese women from being raped. Sadly, she later committed suicide due to stress in 1941. Fitch was head of YMCA in Nanking. He smuggled a few of Magee's films to America in order to show everyone how awful the Japanese treated the Chinese civilians. Fitch did this so that Americans would understand what was going on so that they would no longer supply Japanese troops with war equipment to torture Chinese civilians. Were the Japanese ever held accountable for their actions in Nanking? The Japanese were held accountable later for their actions. Many were taken to trial and sentenced to death, while others were sentenced to a prison term. What role, if any, did Japanese culture play in provoking this genocide? Japanese culture was strict and their army was harshly trained to have discipline. The troops were obedient and took most of their anger out on China. What was the aftermath of the rape of Nanking? After the genocide, the Japanese started receiving consequences for their terrible and cruel actions. The Intentional Military Tribunal convicted Matsu and Tani Haiso after the genocide ended. They were later executed as well. Japan ended up isolating themselves and creating their own culture. Unfortunately, there is still tension with Japan and China. In conclusion, to conclude this PowerPoint, the rape of Nanking was an unfortunate and catastrophic event that killed and tortured thousands of Chinese civilians. The Japanese led the attacks and destroyed the city of Nanking, and in which took years to rebuild. And these are our works cited page. Thank you all for listening.